Hey guys, thanks for coming to the Product Manager Summit. I'm your host, Evo Wong. As a product manager in making, I have a personal breakthrough because I equipped a mental model. You can see that from the summit logo. The logo that represents a mental model. The logo that represents what exactly a product manager is. But I'm not the inventor of this mental model. Our opening keynote speaker is. Martin Eriksson is a 20-plus year veteran of product management who has led product teams across Stockholm, London, and Boston for startups, as well as global brands such as Monster and Financial Times. He is the co-founder of Mighty Product and also the founder of Product Tank. He's the one defined the product management as the intersection between business, technology, and user experience, aka the mental model. If you are interested to know more deeply about the mental model, I encourage you to read the popular article in Mighty Product. What exactly is a product manager? You will see that the mental model and the Mighty Product and also this Summit's logo has so much similarity because I imitated his invention and the mental model to enable myself not only design the Summit logo, but also thrive as a product manager. I hope you will enjoy this opening keynote and master session with Martin Eriksson, building awesome product teams. Without further ado, welcome Martin.
Thank you, Ariel. Thanks for having me. It's a lot of fun to be here, and I think it's great to kind of be part of this first online product summit, really. I think it's a space, as you know, that's still growing and still trying to figure out where we're going. So anything we can do to help each other learn and share what we know, I think is awesome. So thanks for doing this.
Thank you, Martin.
So I'm going to start the talk, and as Ariel said, I want to talk to you guys about building awesome product teams. I'm sometimes better known as the big friendly giant. I've been doing product management for over 20 years, and if you could see me right now, you'd get the joke behind why I'm the big friendly giant. In fact, I've been building stuff online for so long that I started building when the internet came on floppy disks. And I can claim to have beaten Snapchat, Periscope Live, and Facebook to the punch by over 20 years by hosting the first online live stream in Europe. Of course, it did take a giant satellite truck and 5 engineers from the local telco to make it work. The resolution was so terrible, I don't even have a screenshot to show you. And since it was a student orchestra festival, I'm not entirely sure the sound was much better, but it worked. Fast forward, another great experience was in 2010 when I was the VP of product at a startup here in London, building software as a service products. Imagine the office behind these gates down in a dark basement with all the usual startup paraphernalia. We had whiteboards on the walls, we had post-it notes everywhere, we had a foosball table in one corner, an Xbox and TV in the other corner. And on one gray day in November, the whole team was gathered around one of those whiteboards, doing a retrospective on a recent release. Now, this was the biggest release that we'd done since I joined as the VP of products, and we'd totally rewritten and redesigned a core part of the feature set over a number of sprints. And this was a huge success. Every metric had improved, from engagement to conversion to customer satisfaction. The team was happy, and the retrospective was almost entirely positive, which is a feat in and of itself, considering they look like this most of the time. But what I've learned from both of these experiences, and many, many more over the last 20 years, is that none of this is anything to do with me. This is not about a hero product manager or an amazing designer or an amazing boss. Product management isn't even about products. Product management is all about people. So for the last 2 years, my 2 co-authors and I have been out interviewing product leaders from all over the world to try and figure out what it is that makes for these successful teams, what it is that makes us build great products. And it all starts with assembling your team. Like any good heist movie, it's about figuring out all the skills and the people that you need on your team to make it successful. As Aero mentioned, I am somewhat famous for having first drawn this Venn diagram that defines product management as the intersection of the customer, technology, and business. Of course, the problem with this is that most people think that means all product managers have to look like this. But nobody like this exists. This is a unicorn. We all look like this, or we look like this, or we look like this. And it's only by coming together as a team and bringing together these perspectives that we can truly build products people love. And it's important to think like this about a lot of other factors as well. Those are just some of the axes that we can think about. We might want to think about work experience. We might want to think about industry knowledge, creativity, culture, life experience, gender, any other diverse skills that can help your team, and figure out how to map those so that as you hire people and as you expand that team, you know what are complementary skills and you can figure out what you might need in order to completely fill that circle. Because at the end of the day, building great products is all about empathy. And the more we can build empathy within our teams by exposing each other to different perspectives and different inputs, the more likely we are to have empathy with our customers. But product is also a team sport. I don't really care if your title is a product manager, a product owner, data scientist, engineer, designer. We all own the product together. And it's only by working together that we can build great things. Marty Kagan, who's probably the godfather of modern product management, once said that if you're only using your engineers to code, you're only getting half their value. And I would argue that this is true for everyone on the team. If you're only using your designers to push pixels around, you're getting half their value. If you're only using product managers to groom backlogs and write stories, you're only getting half of their value. So it's really thinking about how to bring that whole team together as one cross-functional whole that can work together to figure out how to solve a customer problem. Because it's only by bringing together the problem space of understanding what the customer needs and the solution space that engineering and design and product can bring to the table that you find out what are the opportunities for great products. And these tight cross-functional teams are important for another reason. As we all know, once you have more than one team in a company, you automatically have friction. If one team has to go to another team to ask for something, if you have to go get a ticket made from someone else, if you have a dependency on another team, this is why we have endless amounts of project management tools and project management processes that are all about managing that input and output from other teams. So the more you can design your team to have everything you need in it, to be self-sufficient, the more likely you are to build great products. Now, my favorite example of this is a startup here in London called TransferWise. They do online currency transfers, and they have a team called the Currencies team that is responsible for figuring out what new currency path to launch. Now, it's of course a little bit more complicated than a UX designer going and adding an option for US dollars in a drop-down. They have to open up local bank accounts in the target country. They have to make sure that their agreements match local requirements and regulations. And so in a normal company, they would have to go to a banking team and ask for permission to open accounts. The banking team would put it into their prioritization process, and 6 months later, maybe they would open the account for you. But what TransferWise have done is really embrace the true needs of a cross-functional team and put a banker and put a lawyer in the team. So when they want to open up a new account, they can do it themselves. When they need to update the terms and conditions, they can do it themselves. And so they're completely self-sufficient. They can launch new currencies, they can prioritize it based on the constraints they know they have and be more efficient. It's also important to think about making these teams co-located. I know this is a particular challenge for a lot of people, but it's really important that everyone's sitting around the same table and has that high bandwidth communication with each other. It's so important, in fact, that it's more important to be together than it is to be close to the customer. It's more important than having UX and product near the customer. Ideally, of course, they should be going back and forth, but at the end of the day, you can go and get that information from the customers. You can go get your primary research. You can go get your videos and then bring that back to the team. But when you're trying to figure out what the solution to the customer problem should be, it's so valuable to be sitting next to each other. So we've put together a team, we've figured out what skills we need. Now we have to figure out how to create their environment. And it's not just about foosball tables or giant ball pits, although that can be fun to have in an office. It's about thinking really hard about what it is that makes a team successful. The best example of this is a project called Aristotle that was run at Google. Over a number of years, the HR team at Google looked at all of their teams in Silicon Valley and measured hundreds of data points to figure out what it was that made their teams successful. Being Google, they're of course incredibly data-driven about this. And being Google, of course, they assumed that the more Stanford engineers you could cram into a team, the more successful it would be. Or the more patents or PhDs you had on a team, the more successful it would be. But what they found over this research is that those things had absolutely no correlation to success. In fact, you've probably seen that Google have changed their hiring practices to go away from these really brainy IQ questions to much more about the other factors. And the 5 factors that this team identified were psychological safety, dependability, structure and clarity, meaning, and impact. And we'll talk about all of these in a bit. But the most important one that they found by far was the concept of psychological safety, which is important because it means that anyone in the team is more likely to admit mistakes. They're more likely to take on new roles and challenges. They're more likely to harness new, diverse ideas, and they're more likely to challenge the status quo. All things, I think we can agree, are critical to being innovative and creative and successful as a product team. It's also important to consider what it is that motivates a team. More great research and a great example from a guy called Daniel Pink, who did a bunch of research at MIT around what it is that motivates knowledge workers and creative workers like us in the modern world. We all know the old school thinking around being very kind of economically driven and being incentivized by bonuses and salaries and stock options. But what they found at this research at MIT was that those things had no impact on innovation or creativity or team success. Of course, you have to pay a market salary, but once you hit that baseline, adding options, adding bonuses did not actually impact that employee's creativity or innovation. What he found was so surprising that he wrote a great book about it called Drive, The Surprising Truth About What Motivates Us. And if you don't want to read the book, there's a great 18-minute TED Talk version of this as well, which has been watched by millions. And what they identified was 3 things that motivate us: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Autonomy, we've touched on a little bit. It's our desire to be self-directed, and it increases engagement with the product, engagement with the company, and engagement with the customer over just compliance with leadership. Mastery is our urge to get better skills and master our craft, which is hopefully why you're all here today. And purpose is our desire to do something that has meaning and is important. So the more you can think about these 3 things as motivators in your team, the more you can identify which of the 3 are most important for your team members, and the more you can design your process and your organization around these, the more successful you're going to be. You also have to think about how you want to lead. We've talked a little bit about this already, but really there's 3 main ways to lead people: authoritative, participative, and delegative. Authoritative is where the leader sets clear expectations but makes all the decisions with little or no input from the team. It's very task-driven, and it works well when labor is low-skilled and the leader has all the knowledge and experience. Basically, this is your 18th century factory. Participative leadership is where the manager or the leader gives hands-on guidance to the team, takes input from the team, but retains that final decision-making. It's collaboration-driven, and it's basically modern management theory, hopefully how most of you are working today, where workers have some knowledge, but leadership really can't let go of that decision-making. And finally, we have delegated leadership or autonomous teams, which is where the leader is still there, still very important to give that high-level guidance, set that vision, but they leave all the decision-making to the autonomous team. This is very people-driven, and it works incredibly well for creative jobs like ours, for knowledge workers like us. Autonomy is so important because, as we've heard from all this research, it motivates better, it also scales better. It means that you can stay quick and nimble no matter how large your organization has grown, as you carve out new teams and new autonomous teams that can own their product area, own their customer problem, and focus just on that. It simply works better because your team is smarter than you are. I know mine is. But they're also closer to the customer than you are. So they have more information. They have a better sense of what the customer problem is and how to solve it. Why go through the steps of bringing that back to you when they can make that decision themselves? Now, a lot of people hear autonomy and they think it means anarchy. It means anyone can do whatever they want. No one's going to get any work done. They're just going to slack off, and it's going to be chaos. But the critical part here is something called aligned autonomy, or autonomy with accountability. Henrik Nieberg, who's the organization designer and agile coach at Spotify, and behind their tribes and lead and process, has this great graph to share, where he lined up alignment versus autonomy. If you start with low alignment and low autonomy, this is your classic micromanaging organization and an indifferent culture where nobody's really working on the problem, everyone kind of does what they want, the manager's still micromanaging it. If you move up the alignment scale and you have high alignment but low autonomy, it's a very authoritative organization, very conformist culture, where the manager tells you what to do and tells you how to get there and micromanages it every step of the way. If you move along the autonomy spectrum but without that alignment piece, that is where you can get that chaotic culture, and very typical of most entrepreneurial or startup organizations, where you kind of hope someone's working on a problem and everyone's rushing in different directions. Like any good 2x2 graph, like all consultants know, you want to be in the top right corner where you have both high alignment and high autonomy. And this is how you build an innovative organization with a collaborative culture. The leader is still important, leadership is still a really critical factor, but they're there to set the goal and they leave figuring out how to get there to the team. It all stems from how you set your goals. Most organizations start with a company goal and then they go and tell each team how they're going to contribute to that goal. And then each team tells each individual how to contribute to that goal. And whether it's a quarterly planning process or an annual planning process, you don't find out that you're going to miss the target until the end of that quarter or the end of that year. Autonomous teams think about this very differently. Still starts with a vision and setting a company goal. Again, leadership is really critical here. It's not about chaos. But the critical difference is that after this step, you get out of the way. You let each team go and figure out how they're going to contribute to the company goal. And then each team comes back and reports what they're going to commit to, what they're willing to align themselves with, what they think that they can achieve given their focus, given their product area, and given their ability to execute over that planning window. And as each team reports back, you immediately see the value of doing this, because before the quarter or the year has even started, you can identify if there are any gaps. Maybe Team B needs a little bit of help. Maybe you need to spin up new teams or new business areas to help make sure that the company can hit their goals. But it makes a huge difference to know that before the planning window has even started, rather than after the fact. It also stems from how you measure success and the importance of focusing on outcomes. Hopefully you've all heard this quote that people don't want a quarter-inch drill, they want a quarter-inch hole. But I would argue we have to think even deeper than that and really understand what it is the customer is trying to do. Why do they need a hole in the first place? Are they trying to hang a TV? Are they trying to get music from one room to the next? Or are they simply trying to hang up a picture? As Albert Einstein said, because you always want to quote Albert Einstein in a good talk, If I had 1 hour to save the planet, I'd spend 59 minutes defining the problem, because then solving it would be easy. And as my friend Ken Norton, who's a product partner at Google Ventures, said, once you understand the problem at a deep level, success is easy to articulate, because you know what it's like when the problem is solved. Now, it's a simplistic example, but if we go back to that hole on the wall, if we know what the customer is actually trying to do is to get music from their living room to their bedroom, they might not need a hole in the wall to run speaker wire through. Maybe we can solve it with wireless music. But it also means that you know the problem is solved when you go into the bedroom and you hear music. It's a simplistic example, but it shows the power of really understanding the customer problem and being able to articulate what success actually means. It's also worth emphasizing that to measure this, it's really important to combine quantitative and qualitative. I get really tired of hearing arguments about data-driven or just research-driven organizations, the importance of one or the other, but you have to have both, because data can only tell you what happened, but qualitative can tell you why it happened. And it's only by knowing both of those things that you can truly understand your customers. So we've put together a team, we've set them up for success, hopefully. The final piece is to talk about process. One of my favorite business writers is a guy called Peter Drucker. It'll probably take a lifetime to read everything that he's written about business. But my favorite quote is that there is nothing quite so useless as doing with great efficiency something that should not be done at all. And I think as an industry and as a profession, we've kind of gotten stuck on this efficiency piece. We've gotten stuck on the delivery side of the problem, and we've focused all of our attention on getting better and better at delivering stuff, at pushing up updates, at pushing out new features, at delivering new things, as opposed to really figuring out what it is our customers need. And that's why we have a profusion of tools and processes that help us do that. From Prince 2, project management, to Agile, Scrum, and Lean today, these are all about delivery. And perhaps unsurprisingly, they almost all have their roots in the Toyota production system. And they're fantastic tools to have. They're fantastic processes to follow when you know exactly what you want to build, and you want to build it as cheaply, efficiently, and error-free as possible. But what we've forgotten when we implement these processes is that the teams that design the engines or the cars at Toyota, they don't work like this. They can't work like this. It's a very different process to understand the market needs and customer needs and figure out how to solve that. And there are more tool sets and methodologies than I can fit onto a slide that actually help you do this. And so it's really important for us to make sure that we're focusing on balancing these two sides. And of course, there is no actual line between these two. As I hope you all know, it's a continuous loop of discovery and delivery. It's a continuous loop of discovery, problem definition, designing solutions, delivery, experimentation, measuring outcomes, and then all back around again. Because at the end of the day, you need discovery to make sure that you're building the right thing, and you need delivery to make sure you're building the thing right. So beware of the dogma that comes with all of these processes, that comes with all of these different tool sets. And remember that even the Agile Manifesto, which I'm a huge fan of, has as one of its tenets that we value responding to change over following a plan. And what is following Kanban or Agile or Scrum or any of these tool sets than a plan? You have to figure out what works best for your team, your market, your cadence, your situation, and take the best bits of everything to make sure that you're balancing these two sides. So just to wrap up a little bit, final thoughts. John Maeda, who's a famous designer, said that don't forget that people make the stuff, but relationships make the bigger stuff. So once you get the relationships and the people part right, everything else will follow. So as we've talked about, you have to assemble your team, making sure that they're diverse, cross-functional, co-located. Set them up for success by thinking about psychological safety, autonomy, purpose, and then pick the right process, ensuring that you're balancing discovery and delivery at every step of the process. Or, to put it another way, hire smart people, get the hell out of the way, and then focus on customer outcomes. Because product management is not about product. Product management is about people. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Martin. I few questions. You can let the summit audience to see you again. And yeah, it is a very great lead up to the entire summit. And what you just mentioned in this masterclass session is a utopia for me if I were a product manager in a company. And I have 3 questions that I want to ask you in this Q&A session. The first one is, what you just mentioned is really a utopia. Why not all the companies in right now don't build the company and the product team like what you just mentioned? I want to define the problem first, because as a product management newbie, I really want to bring the culture that you mentioned into my company, but I don't have much authority, influence at this moment. So yeah, I want to define the problem first with you.
I think it's one of those things where in everything that we do at Mind the Product and everything we wrote about in the book, it's important to kind of know what that utopia might be. Even if you're not there yet, it's important to know what that might look like and to know that there are teams and companies doing it successfully. It's one of the reasons I really like bringing up the research that's out there, the examples that I have, because it's proof that it isn't just a fictional utopia. It's not just, an idea in the back of someone's mind. These are how the best organizations are working today. So with that said, I agree with you. It's utopia for a lot of people. It's hard to get there. And there are a lot of organizations everywhere in the world today that don't work like this yet and that are struggling to figure out how to be more autonomous, how to give kind of more control back to the team, and how to stay innovative and how to stay competitive. And again, I think by having that picture in mind, it helps us as team members, as individual contributors, or as managers of teams to figure out how we can slowly, step by step, get there. Like most change management, I would say if you have no authority as a product manager, you're just part of a team, figure out what the smallest thing that you can do is to start moving you step by step towards this goal. Don't try and convince your boss to, carve out a new team and a new office and kind of go get to go do your own thing for 3 months and promise that it's going to be amazing. Of course, no one's going to sign off on that. But if you can take a small project or the next feature and really start thinking about this from a user-centric point of view, and show that by bringing together the whole team to look at that problem, bring the solutions together, you'll get more efficiency, you'll be able to deliver faster, you'll be able to be more nimble and deliver a better solution at the end of the day. And it can start with something as small as, redesigning the footer on the web page or the next feature that you're going to do or whatever it is, by just showing that you can make change by adopting some of these principles, you can start building that proof internally that this is actually a better way to work and start getting more and more autonomy and more kind of customer-driven approach.
Thank you so much. If the smallest things that I want to do is to encourage my company to read the product leadership book, the last slide that you just showed us, can you talk a little bit about the product leadership and also the product leader? Because I noticed there's a trend that many top product manager in the product management field, they started to claim themselves as, I'm not just a product manager, I'm a product leader. I think that must be a movement happening, stem from you and your book. Can you briefly talk about the product leadership book and also the product leader?
I think it's definitely one of those things where product management's been around for a while. And over the last kind of 10, 20 years, it's been maturing a lot. But also over the last 10 or 20 years, you've seen people who started as a product manager in a small team somewhere in the US or in Europe, kind of starting to take that step up, right? So they've been in the career for 10 or 20 years, like me. They've realized that they have skills that are applicable not just to a hands-on operational product team, but also to a team of teams or to an organization as a whole. We've also seen other trends in this direction. So the design-led or product-led companies that are out there, more and more product people ending up in VC roles who are appreciative of the skill set that a great product person can bring. And so I think we're generally seeing product kind of taking a bigger role in companies and taking that kind of leadership position. It's only in the last kind of 5 years that you see more and more organizations actually have something like a chief product officer or a VP of product that actually reports directly to the CEO. It took us that long to kind of break out of a silo and either be part of marketing or be part of tech or be a design role. And of course, in a product company, especially, or a SaaS company or anything where the product is core, it has to be a standalone team. It has to be a standalone organization within the company. And that doesn't mean that you should be siloed or sit in your own ivory tower and decide what the product should look like, but it has to be that valuable in the organization that it reports directly to the CEO, has a seat at the management team, and can be part of the business strategy. And so I think we've seen these trends kind of come together to really elevate product as a craft, elevate product as a role, and start having these leaders. And so I think the big distinction between a product leader and a product manager is really whether you're hands-on with a product as a product manager should be, or you're basically leading as teams of product managers like a product leader might be. I think it's interesting that actually a lot of the same principles that you use to be a great product manager are also applicable to being a great product leader. As you mentioned, most product managers have no authority. Nobody reports to us. We have no power in the company. So we have to figure out how to get there by telling stories and bringing everyone along with the product vision. We have to figure out how to communicate and get everyone on board with our product vision. We have to make sure everyone wants to work on the problem by understanding how important it is to the customer. We have to kind of use that influence to get things done. And that's a great skill set to have as a leader as well. I think there's also another interesting thing to think about, which is we're starting to see a little bit of this, and I think we might need to see more of it, in that in the technical world, you kind of have two tracks in leadership, right? You have the kind of technical leadership, which is an architect kind of path where you're the most technical person in the organization. You have the best understanding of the tech stack. You've been doing it for 20, 30 years, so you know where all the skeletons lie and how to build the best possible technology stack. And then you have a CTO track, which is much more about managing people, managing an organization, budgeting, finance, all that kind of stuff. And they're kind of different skill sets, right? It's more about soft skills as the CTO, and it's more about hard skills as an architect. And I hope that we see more of that come out in product, where you see some companies like Atlassian, for example, have this idea of a lead product manager or a principal product manager that is the most senior product person in the organization in terms of skill set of building the best possible product. And so they might be responsible for the most important product in the portfolio, but they're still hands-on product people actually building product day to day with their teams. And then you have a separate track, which is the VP product or CPO track, which is again much more about people management, much more about soft skills, much more about influence and office politics and all that fun stuff. So I think we are starting to see a little bit of that, those two paths diverge, but really it's the overall trend behind the importance of product and user experience and the importance of product strategy to business strategy that has meant that this kind of new group of people have come forth in organizations who are product leaders and not just product managers.
Thank you so much. I think my last question I'm going to ask you is, how do we as a individual product manager with just less than 1 to 2 product management experience under the belt, how do we gain the influence, learn the leadership, learn the product skills? Do you have any advice for that, any mindset to have keep in mind to guide us?
I think it's definitely keeping those two sides in mind, right? So it's keeping in mind the hard skills. What are the skills that you need to develop if you like me, come from a very UX background, think about how you can get involved in technical products or work together with technical people to make sure that you pick up those skills, or the business side, whatever those kind of hard skills are that you might be missing. Figure out how you can be part of a product team that has that, or find a mentor that has that, or work for a product team where they're really strong on that and you can bring your, your complementary skill set to bear. And that is the best way to learn how to pick up those skills. And at the same time, the soft skills is much more about communication, and it's much more about making sure that everyone understands what the product vision is, what the customer problem is that you're trying to solve. And so work on those things. There's all sorts of random things that you can actually pick up that are super helpful as a product manager, from storytelling to, almost stand-up comedy classes to how to write better. Like, there's different skill sets like that that really help you level up your game and be a better communicator in the company. And so think about what those things might be. Think about even getting involved with your community, right? So obviously I have a really sweet spot for Product Tank, which is our local Product Tank meetup community. It's now in over 130 cities around the world. And go to one of those, share your story, tell how you got into product, tell about a recent release that you did. Even just by standing up with 20, 30, 100 other people, you learn so much more about not just what you've done, which is a huge thing about writing a talk or writing a blog post. It's about kind of internalizing your own lessons, but also learning how to communicate. And those are so important when you start building your career and start building towards being a product leader.
Sorry, speaking of the product tank, I want to ask you some question, because I'm located in Hong Kong now. And my the product tank just hosts the first free product tank in Hong Kong, and then I attended the first one. It is amazing. And I really encourage everyone to go to the product tank, because you can meet so much other product managers, and so not just product managers, so many people in the product management field to want to build great product. The question I want to ask is, how do the product management newbie get the most out of product tank by attending these the product tank? Do you have any advice for that?
I think definitely. I mean, as you said, I started it for that very reason, right? I was in that startup I was talking about in London. I was the only product hire before I started building up my team, and I had nobody else to talk to about it. I had no one to share these lessons with. I had no one to kind of share the frustrations with and figure out how to solve some of these problems. So I started Product Tank just so I could meet other people who had the same challenges. And I think that's really what it's all about. So even if you have no experience whatsoever, go along to a Product Tank, go along to your local meetup or your local product camp if you have one in your town as well, and just immerse yourself with other product people, other designers, product managers, engineers who care about building great products and care about getting towards this utopia that we kind of talked about a little bit today. And I think you can get a lot out of it from just attending, listening to the talks, maybe asking questions, getting engaged with the audience. But also the most important thing that we try to do with Product Tank is it's about sharing all those local stories and all the local knowledge. So I really encourage people to get up and do a talk. It's not that scary. 10, 20 minutes, share a lesson learned. And some of the best talks are actually people who get up and share a miserable failure that they had at work, a project that went terribly, terribly wrong, and then what they learned from it. And again, I think why that's so important is not just sharing it with the rest of the audience, but by thinking about that properly, by taking that step back and taking a couple of hours out of your day or out of your week to write the talk, you have to think differently about the process. You have to think about what it was that went wrong and what you really are going to learn from it. And it's like a retrospective and a scrum. It's just a great thing to get into in terms of thinking about how are you going to learn from this? How are you going to make sure those mistakes don't happen again in your organization or personally? And so just writing the talk in itself is a hugely valuable exercise. And then being able to share it with your team is also ridiculously rewarding. So I think just get involved, just meet people, talk, share your own lessons. Even if it's not on the stage, just share your lessons with the people that you meet there, and you're going to get so much out of that community.
Yeah. So global knowledge from my product, maybe local knowledge from Product Tank. I don't have. Sorry, really the last question, and then I'm gonna ask you to where can the summit audience find you online? Can you briefly talk about my product? Because for me, I don't have a chance yet. I believe I will do. I must do later. I will go to my product conference. This is a great conference, and then I can watch it online now if the conference is over. Can you briefly talk about my product? What can the summit audience get out of it?
Yeah. So I think it was just a continuation of Product Tank, right? It was the same people that helped me get Product Tank up and running, and we figured we just wanted to take it to that next level. What is that next level up? And I think where Product Tank, as you said, it's about the local stories, but it's also about the kind of more hands-on, day-to-day, like, here's something we tried and didn't work. What we try to do with Mind the Product is bring the really big stories. What are the big trends that are happening? What are the things we need to be thinking about? How do we do some of these big change management pieces that are so important to get the rest of our organization behind us? And so it's kind of the bigger picture, it's the bigger talks. It's also obviously the best way for us to be able to get together other amazing speakers. And so we started in 2012 in London with about 500 people. Now we run it in both San Francisco and London every year with over 1,500 people. I think in London we had attendees from over 52 countries around the world, which is amazing to me. And as you say, we know that not everyone in the world can come to these things. So one of the things we're very proud of is that we actually film every talk. We put them all up for free after the conference so that we can share that knowledge with everyone around the world. And really it is that big picture and how we move the craft forward together and become better product managers. It's still why I'm so excited to be part of this, is I get to hear great talks every day and get to learn how to be better at this job.
Thank you so much. So both my product and Product Tank and the Product Leadership book are all the awesome resources we can get access to as a product management newbie. So before we end this summit session, where can the summit audience find Martin, you online?
So the easiest place is to find me on Twitter, where again I'm BFG Martin, the big friendly giant. Obviously you can find Mind the Product at mindtheproduct.com, Product Tank product.com, and the book is at productleadershipbook.com.
So thank you so much, Martin. I really want to bring the picture for paint the picture in my company for the utopia, because that's really what I want to work at, and also build the product I like and engage with customers. So thank you again.
Thank you for having me. Start small. It's the best way to get it done.
So for the summit audience, it is a perfect lead up for the entire summit. We will have 29 other sessions followed by this opening keynote session. So I will catch you in the next session. Thank you for watching.